It has been a week, and here to discuss all the happenings, the stories, the topics. One good one Wednesday with Blake Snell winning Cy Young, but obviously what is hanging over the franchise, the fan base, the city, baseball, the passing of Peter Seidler, which you and I, Todd Strain, Darnay Trip with you on Friar podcast, discussed in a episode on Tuesday, just our kind of initial reactions to the heart-wrenching news that we got Tuesday that Padres chairman Peter Seidler had passed. We've learned a little bit more, some today on Thursday, had some conversations, gotten some different perspective. There's obviously the Blake Snell win. So different things to discuss, Todd, and good to be with you as always.
Good to see you, Darnay, on the On Friar podcast number 2. The deuce of the week.
Number 2 of the week. Yeah. Wish that weren't the case. Wish we had other reasons to do a second episode of the week. Maybe that'll come next week. All that stuff seems a little bit silly at this point, but we will discuss, everything that's gone on this week, the good and the bad, and what things look like going forward. I have to show love to the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. And I meant to do this as I was walking in. Oh, yes, we do have some new information from our friends at OG's, Todd.
Nice. What do you got for me? Serve it up.
Our friend Chris Bly, I sent him a note the other day. I said, hey, we got any new notes from the fine folks at OG's? And I like to do that every few months, keep it fresh. Starting November 15th, this is a cold read, Todd. When you buy an OG's gift card worth $25 or more in store, you'll also unwrap a custom OG's and Coca-Cola ornament, the perfect gift this season. Love that. Have you decorated for Christmas yet, Todd Strain?
No, and my wife is itching to get it up before Thanksgiving, but I'm like, oh no, I believe in Christmas after Thanksgiving. So I think I might get my way this year.
Well, I mean, Thanksgiving is, it's next week. It's really snuck up on me. It feels early, but it's not as early as it seems. Sip into the season with style at OG's beginning December 1st. When you spend $35 and enjoy an OG's pint, you'll cheers to the season with an OG's holiday glass to your collection. I like that. I like the ornament. I really like the glass. I think the glass would get a lot of use. So a couple good promotions. Obviously, always updating their menu. Good stuff at OG's. Good OG's beers, and so and it's a great place to watch a game. Tons of TVs. So maybe F1 in Vegas this weekend. NBA, NHL. Obviously, NFL on Sunday, college football. OG is a great place to do that. Good food, good beer, good spot to catch your favorite team or favorite sport. Without further ado, the walk-up music. Always glad to have you with us. It's the On Friar podcast, brought to you by NBC 7. Todd Strain, Darnay Trip, here with you. As you said, Todd, second episode of the week. What has been an emotional week, a heavy week, a busy week, and one that's going to take a little while to process for sure, for everybody involved. A lot of different places to go today. Blake Snell winning a Cy Young, certainly not a small story, a small accomplishment in a week like this. Maybe doesn't get kind of the same play that it normally would, but we'll discuss that, his future, and Blake had some just wonderful words for Peter Seidler that we'll pass along. You've been talking to a lot of people since news of Seidler's passing broke on Tuesday, and one longtime local sports figure who pulled no punches in response to the news and through the lens of what happened this past season. And so we'll get to his words as well. There was some news today, Todd.
Okay, go hit me with it.
Eric Kutsenda, a name that we have become somewhat familiar with Just the name, don't know too much about the man at this point. But a name that we've become familiar with because he kind of stepped in Peter Seidler's place towards the end of the season, obviously with some kind of big decisions and conversations to be had after the season, was kind of that figurehead, to kind of handle business and represent Peter Seidler in various aspects, has now been kind of appointed to uh, be the Padres interim control person, as the headline reads in The Athletic. Evan Drellick of The Athletic, I believe, was the one that broke the news this morning or early this afternoon. As I pull up his tweet, Eric Kutsenda is the new Padres control person following Peter Seidler's passing. Seidler's stake in the team isn't a trust. A different control person could be named down the road, but Kutsenda is in charge for now, and it is in an interim role, or is an interim label, I should say. So what this all means, we obviously don't know much about Eric Kutsenda. You can Google him. You can find his page on the Seidler Equity Partners website. Tells you that he studied at DePaul and University of Illinois, that he's an avid outdoorsman. He obviously has a lot of history with Peter Seidler. They go back to 1999 when they were, and it might probably before then, but co-founded Seidler Equity Partners together, managing partner as well. So clearly a lot of familiarity and a lot of history there with Peter Seidler, and he will be the guy that operates in his place now going forward for the foreseeable future. How long that is to be determined.
Well, I think the first time I heard the name Eric Kutsenda was Darren Smith was on this pretty early, and he brought this name to light and kind of was filling in the local sports scene of just kind of the impact that the Seidler Equity Group was now having with the day-to-day operations and their impact on their baseball operations. So that was the first time I heard that name. So this kind of jives with some things that we've heard lately. It also jives with some concerns and some hesitancy from people inside baseball that express some sentiments that maybe Tom Seidler, who is Peter's brother, was a vice president with the Padres, would not be the man to ascend to that role for various reasons. He's always been one to kind of be in the background. So to have him all of a sudden forced to the forefront may have been a challenge. So this jives with some things that have happened in the last few months and some thoughts in the immediacy after Peter's passing that this might be the way they go. It does give you pause when you think about how freely the Padres have spent in recent years, and now you have essentially a finance guy who is coming in on a team that's been ordered to trim payroll and get in line, with now calling the shots. And for hardcore Padre fans, this is yet another sign that they're pointed in a different direction than the previous years, suspending in the payroll.
Yeah, I do wonder about that.
Not necessarily, Darnay, but it points in that indication.
Yeah. As you mentioned, he was added to the Padres front. This is from The Athletic. Added to the Padres front office directory this summer as a special advisor to CEO Eric Kutsenda. And we had heard that in the past. How they function, what the give and take is there, we don't really know. A guy that has been around Peter Seidler for a handful of decades, clearly knows him pretty well. I would think that, might be a more conservative approach, certainly. And I think we knew even before Tuesday that they were going to operate a bit differently than they had in the last couple of years, and they were going to have to kind of scale back a bit. But I would think I would be more concerned if it was somebody brand new coming in, maybe with that finance background, but somebody that knows Peter Seidler as well as he does and understands what's important to him and his priorities, and has seen how he's kind of managed this franchise. I would think that they wouldn't want to go too far in a different direction, and maybe as a way of honoring Peter Seidler, like, What was the line from Seidler? There will be no fire sale, and he had the desire to keep it within the family. And I would think part of keeping it within the family is kind of maintaining the same vision, even if you're not spending 250, $270 million a year. You're still going down the course of improving this team, bringing in big name players, having some kind of stability, and having the fan base, um, be able to rely on there being a talented enough, competitive enough team from year to year.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Kutsenda has worked closely with Seidler, so he has a feel for what he wanted in the baseball team with the Padres moving forward and how it worked the past few years. And let's be real, even if the Padres trim payroll, they're not going down to like 80 million. They're still going to have a pretty hefty payroll. It will still be in the, most likely top 20%, top 10% possibly of the league. So you're going to have a smaller payroll, but it's not going to be drastic. It's not going back to the archaic days of Padre tiny payrolls and stuff like that. So, but I think, Darnay, the point that you said is that he's worked closely with Peter Seidler. So if Seidler trusts him, if you're a Padre fan, Peter Seidler has a pretty good judge of character and has a pretty close web, and he's very loyal to his friends and employees. So that if Peter Seidler liked him and trusted him, that bodes well for the future of the Padre organization in the immediacy.
A note from the Athletics piece that I don't believe we've heard elsewhere. I haven't had a chance to see Kevin Acey's reporting today, but Padres plan to publicly address their ownership situation next week. And we also expect a decision on the managerial front next week as well, which of course is on hold and has been on hold since Tuesday. So we knew that was likely coming, and obviously if they're introducing Phil Nevin or Benji Gill or Shilter Flaherty, there would be questions to AJ Preller, whoever's on the podium, about, Peter Seidler and the future and kind of the inner workings of the organization now. So it would make sense that I would assume Eric Kutsenda, Eric Grupner, that we hear from those guys next week. At least that's what the Athletic seems to indicate, and maybe shed some light. I mean, to get to know the guy a little bit. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to hear from him, get a sense of who he is, what he's all about, what the plan is. If this is merely just a temporary thing, or if there's a chance that he could be the guy kind of moving forward. You mentioned Darren Smith. I mean, he had a good point today saying how, Peter Seidler was kind of operating in the background for a while with Ron Fowler. Yeah. It was Seidler's money, but Ron Fowler was kind of the mouthpiece, and an entertaining and a compelling mouthpiece at that. And so when he steps down and Peter Seidler emerges as, the chairman, again, I'm relatively new in the market, so I wasn't as familiar with, I knew of Peter Seidler, but hadn't had interactions with him, that sort of thing. But Darren's point was, they took over in 2012. This was the end of 2020. He had 8 years, to really kind of figure this out, and was obviously really involved and was having conversations. And you hear that, he's one to kind of get to know people and understand how things work. And so he was obviously comfortable and, more than competent, did fantastic work once he kind of took the reins. Whereas with Eric Kutsenda, we don't know. I mean, the fact that we're just kind of learning this name within the last couple months, what is his comfort level? What is his confidence and aptitude as it pertains to running a Major League Baseball franchise and all the different things that come with that? Because it's not just merely a business. There is that side of it, and he obviously is adept at that. But just how you work with the league and all these different aspects of the job, like how how locked in is he on that. He also, from the Athletic piece, and again, something we kind of knew, he and Eric Grupner were having to present a plan to Major League Baseball to reduce their salary because the debt service rules were such that the Padres needed to. I mean, they it wasn't just by choice, like based on league kind of mandates. um, because of those debt service rules, they were having to kind of scale back on their salary because you can only incur so much debt. I think this is just a way for the league and its franchises to kind of protect themselves. And so, he was operating in that sense. And hopefully next week we'll get a clearer picture of his involvement and what it looks like going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's very important going from Peter Seidler, an owner who was loved in San Diego, but who was also very recognizable. People knew who he was, whether you were a Padre fan or just in San Diego. So now you have his passing, unexpected as it was, even though he had health issues. So I think it's important for Eric to get in front of San Diego, be a reassuring voice, kind of smooth things over any tensions or unease that Padre fans might have. To hear from Eric would be very valuable. Also to see his face. I mean, he could probably walk into any Starbucks in San Diego County and no one would know who he was. I mean, you're talking maybe 50 to 150 people in all of San Diego could probably pick him out of a crowd. So just to see his face and say, hey, this is the guy who we are now entrusting our franchise to make the decisions. And there are a lot of decisions to be made. It's a very, very important offseason. This is a guy, and to give some Padre fans some reassurance for sure. Now, it'll be interesting to see if they do that 2 separate days, the new ownership and the new face, or if they lump it all in with the manager and have a mega Padres day.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you might do the ownership piece first because those are the more important questions.
100%.
I think, Eric Grupner might be asked like, hey, when can we expect, an announcement, on a manager? And that's kind of it. You know what I mean? Hey, tomorrow or Wednesday, maybe we know at that point. I don't think he's going to get kind of grilled from that standpoint. But if you have AJ Preller and a new manager, I would want to get the big thing kind of taken care of and addressed first.
If you have everyone in that podium together or table, that could make for some awkward, interesting questions where there's a lot of crossover that you might not want crossover on those situations.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, how much did Peter Seidler know this was coming? It all kind of caught us by surprise, other than knowing that he had some health issues in the past and was dealing and recovering from something. But, the fact that, and who knows, I don't know when Peter Seidler's stake was transferred to a trust, but that gives you some indication as well, and I'm not super slick with kind of some of the money stuff, and wills and trusts and all that sort of thing. But that would seem to fall in line with his desire to keep the organization within his family. And you think of owners like, oh, some rich guy's going to swoop in, pay billions of dollars to buy the club, and then he can run it. This, I would imagine, is a way for Peter to do what he wants to do and keep it within the family.
100%. And as we know, his family, going back to the O'Malleys, has a long history of success in Major League Baseball and love for the game. There are a lot of people in that family that have not only spent many years and made huge impacts in the game, but love baseball and are stewards of the game and have shown for decades that they can run a franchise, know what it takes to connect with fans, going back to the, Dodgers, Brooklyn Dodgers, obviously. They're a pretty powerful baseball family, so I would think they would want to keep the team in that family as much as possible. And their track record with 2 organizations is pretty solid, Darnay, on being a good ownership group and a great ownership family, for sure.
And the last thing you'd want is for somebody to come in new, or somebody, connected with Peter Seidler, and to strip it down, and to change course and sell off stars and all the expensive parts, and make those kind of just business only decisions, and strip down what he had done the last few years, which has built up this exciting, talent laden, promising roster. there's a lot of different ways where we hope Peter Seidler's legacy kind of continues in San Diego, and a lot of that is away from Petco Park, away from baseball, what he's done within the community, and how he's helped so many people. But I think another way of, hopefully that they're able to honor Peter Seidler is by continuing to, you know, run this organization in a bold manner, wanting to shoot for championships, wanting to be competitive, wanting to have star power, give people reason to be invested and excited about this team. And that's obviously been rewarded with attendance and all the engagement and the excitement. I just hope they keep that kind of same ambition, even knowing that, they're going to have to cut some costs here and there.
Yeah, and that is a way that is essentially brand new to San Diego. For years, previous Padre owners did not run the team that way. They kept payroll way down. They didn't listen to fans as much. They had huge fire sales, except for a couple of years where we know the Padres were very successful and went to the World Series. And even with the Chargers were an organization who did not spend, in many fans' opinion, enough money on the necessary things to win and did not listen to their fans at all with what they wanted for in-game experiences, what they wanted, whether it was wearing the powder blue uniforms, what they wanted, all sorts of, they didn't listen to their fans at all. And they gave the vibe that they did not care about their fans. So the Padres have been a revelation for San Diego sports under Peter O'Malley and really at the Ron Fowler years where it started to change. So hopefully, as you said, we keep going in that direction. We don't revert back to the evil old ways of San Diego sports owners.
No, certainly not. He's been a breath of fresh air and just such an inspiring, refreshing figure to be around, to have that role of owner, because that's not necessarily what you get, as folks in San Diego know well. And it's what better way to honor him than by putting together a special season next year? There are a lot of different ways you can honor Peter
Yeah.
Seidler. Again, some non-baseball related, and those are probably the most important. But um, you know, I'm anxious to hear from more of the players. I think we said it on Tuesday. What are we going to hear from Manny Machado? I think he's the one, just because of the bond that they've had, and I'm really curious to see what he'll have to say, because how much Peter Seidler meant to him, and we'll hear from Blake Snell, but yeah, it's gonna be really interesting just to kind of hear from these guys and see how things look going forward. Let's get to Jay Paris here. And this might rub some people the wrong way. I mean, some people might, it might cause folks to bristle, because that's Jay. Jay says it with his chest. He doesn't pull any punches, as you said in your tweet, and he's the guy that's covered sports here for a long time, and a guy that we always enjoy getting a chance to run into and catch up with. And you spoke to him, what, Thursday, right? Today?
Yeah. This morning I caught up with him for kind of a bigger story, just on how after the Chargers left, San Diego was in a dark place with pro sports. There was kind of a hole, and Peter Seidler and the Padres stepped into that hole and filled that void, and kind of gave San Diego a sports identity again, and gave them a sense of pride, which the Chargers has kind of ripped out.
Yeah, and the clip that we're going to show you, I mean, he's talking about kind of in hindsight how tough this
Yes.
year was, which is something that people have mentioned. It's like, oh man, it's like we didn't necessarily know the extent of things. We didn't know that this is how it was all going to play out. But man, you wish we could have gotten so much more out of Peter Seidler's final season, because he deserves so much more. So Jay Paris, with some pretty stern criticism for the Padres, just based on what Seidler did, what Seidler stood for, and how things played out for the Padres this past season.
Peter's passing emphasizes what a colossal disappointment last season was for the Padres. And for those guys to be late for buses and snipping at each other and not pulling the rope in the same direction and pointing fingers, and And this isn't an anonymous quotes. These are from Juan Soto. This is from Joe Musgrove. This is from Manny Machado, that they weren't always prepared and they weren't always willing to fight. And the illustration of a gentleman who was a 2-time cancer survivor, the grit, the determination that took, and for his team not to be able to rally, and for his team to throw in the towel early in games. And the body language was atrocious. Now, does that mean anything? I don't know. But the contrast was so telling that here's an owner doing absolutely everything he can to make you win. And he's supplying you with everything and buying everything. And the first sign of adversity, you're reaching for the white flag. Where this guy saw adversity in every aspect of his life, medically, physically, and mentally. But he kept grinding. And that really strikes me how there wasn't much of a grind with that team. Yeah. And that team can say, wait till next year. Peter can't say that. Last year was his next year. So I'm just hoping, and I know it's pro sports, and I don't want to get Pollyannish about it, but last year the Padres players played for Peter's money. This year I hope they play for his spirit.
I mean, that's a really strong message there from Jay, and that's something that's crossed my mind is just what's the attitude, the demeanor, the disposition like now with this team going forward? What happens when they face some adversity? Because I think a lot of us said it just didn't seem to show a lot of fight. Now they rallied there in September. They gave themselves a chance. I think when a lot of people expect them to fold, but there are a lot of nights, the first few months of the season where just like you didn't see a whole lot of heart. And, you wonder if a situation like this is whether it's a reminder, a wake up call, source of inspiration, whatever. I wonder how much they carry Peter with him through the highs and lows next year.
Yeah, and I hate to be cruel, but it's too late. I mean, last year was the year. I mean, it's not too late for the Padres as an organization, but it's too late for Peter, which sucks, because he put everything into last year's team. You could make the case. Like, he okayed every move, he okayed every financial resource. They were going for it. He talked about the parade. You could tell last year was the year that he wanted to make it happen. And as Jay said, like, there was just such a disconnect between what Peter Seidler seemingly gave that team and what the team gave back to their owner. I know, I'm not saying they didn't try and they didn't try hard enough, but it was just such a bummer. Even before Peter's passing, that team was good. It was built to win. Sure, there were holes, but they should have been much better. They should have been competitive. They should have been in a deep playoff run. And that was the year, and it was just such a bummer. And now, a few months after the season with Peter's passing, it just makes you even look at it again and be like, man, what a missed opportunity, and what a terrible way for Peter to end his. And Peter wouldn't throw. He's not upset at the players or anything like that. He would always have.
He would never want it to be about him.
No, he wouldn't. It's not about Peter, and he would find a bright light in last season and say we're going to come back better this year and we're going to learn from it. But it's just really a bummer looking from the outside that they couldn't deliver for Peter last year, and it's just such a juxtaposition. I used the juxtaposition on this last podcast from Spanos to Seidler as owners, and it's just a juxtaposition, as Jay said, from an owner that fight and fighted cancer over and over again, and for a team, as you said, that seemingly game in and game out didn't have the fight to even make the playoffs on a year where 2 more wins would have gotten you in there.
Yeah, and it's hard because, do the players have any idea what was going on, and so that's where I want to be a little bit careful. Like it
100%.
Doesn't reflect great, I appreciate Jay said, especially, playing for Peter's spirit. But I think that's part of what makes this difficult, and part of what makes it tricky is we have no idea who knew about any of this. Did Peter invest so much into this past season because maybe he had some indication that, he was going to be around much longer. Did guys in the front office, business associates, family members, did they have an idea that something like this was coming? Much less the players. And again, Peter obviously very private, and that's part of what made this catch us all. What how this caught us all by surprise is, you hear from the team, he had a medical procedure. You don't hear much beyond that. And then we get the news on Tuesday. And so clearly somebody who kept a lot close to the vest. And so, I don't know what sort of indication the players had that things weren't great. Heck, maybe they played well in September because, of what happened in August. And they thought, we might, this might not be a good situation. And so who knows there. I think, it last season looked bad for a number of different reasons. And now maybe a situation like this just kind of makes it sting a little bit more, because you're like, man, this guy really went for it. And his last go around, it just kind of went so poorly. But again, I think I now think, okay, moving forward, like, how do we operate? How do we respond to adversity? And how do you kind of honor Peter Seidler as best you can in the way you play and the way you go about your business?
Yeah, and that's for each player on the Padres roster to figure out, internally. They'll have to look themselves in the mirror and say, like, look, I could have battled more. I gave up some at-bats. I wasn't focused on that game. I checked out mentally. Each player will have to decide that, and whether they really come to that realization, and that was a real factor. We'll see in the coming year. But sure, there's something to be said for winning one for Peter. I mean, that can be a powerful thing. It's happened in sports with many teams in many sports, going back to Hank Gathers and Loyola Marymount. We've seen magical runs. I think when the Padres went to the World Series in '84, they had Joan Croc's initials on their uniforms. So this is a thing that has happened before. It's happened in San Diego, and that would be wonderful. It would be wonderful if every Padre player came back next year with a little more fight and a little more giddy up in their game, and then the results happened on the field, and it turned into a magical season. But this is professional sports. It's not 8-year-old girls softball. We're not winning for Layla, who just broke her leg. There's more factors at play here. So,
and these things you can't determine how they're going to play out. And you hope, we would all love for there to be the fairy tale ending, the storybook finish. I think we're all going to be pulling for that. But there's just no guarantees, as you said, in professional sports and in life in general. I thought the other day, I was like, if they do win, they do get a parade, that ought to be, whoever, if it's Todd Gloria, I don't know when's the next, whoever the mayor is at that point. I don't know anything about this stuff. But
it's not Bob Filner, I'll tell you that.
It needs to be Peter Seidler Day in San Diego.
There you go. I like that.
If in the near future, if this organization, kind of in the if they carry out the vision of Peter Seidler within his family, what have you, if in this era of San Diego Padres baseball, there was a World Series and there was a parade that he spoke so optimistically about and freely and openly about, and a guy that served the city in so many different ways, not only do you have a parade, but you name that Peter Seidler Day in San Diego, and that is Peter Seidler Day from that point forward. I think that would be an appropriate way to honor what he did, not just for the franchise, but for the city as a whole. Any final thoughts on Seidler before we talk a little bit of Snell?
Yeah, just real quick. All the Padre fans I talked to about Peter Seidler, they all say that they come back to the same thing. He changed what San Diego Padre baseball could be. They never thought San Diego Padre baseball could be a team with a huge payroll, loaded with stars, that is a perennial World Series power and is going for it against the big boys. He changed Padre baseball from what it was to what it could be and what it can be.
Yeah, no question. Yeah. So Wednesday, this was expected. Blake Snell, National League Cy Young winner. Feels a little bit different. I was kind of looking forward to having Derek on. Derek's a little under the weather today, so he's not joining us. But Derek hasn't always been the most complimentary of Blake Snell. We've brought up the Cy Young candidacy. He's bristled a little bit. I think he's just annoyed at the starts that only last 5 innings. Although if you look at his game log as the season went on, there weren't too many of those. 9 straight quality starts to end the season. But Derek not totally enamored by Blake Snell, and I'll read this too, which is funny because he's certainly not the only one. And something I've done a couple times when Padres have been, and I didn't have an opportunity to put together this piece or whatever I was planning on doing, but I've reached out to folks that we've had on the podcast and that sort of thing. Just hey, broader kind of big picture outlook, because we're in our kind of little San Diego cocoon here and see things through that lens. But what's your outlook? And so I asked a few people, like, what's it seems like the favorite to win, and from your standpoint, why is that? And I got 2 vastly different responses. So all this to say that, like, there are other people in Derek Togerson's camp. The positive response came from Baseball America's Kyle Glazer, who we've had on the podcast many, many times, a San Diego guy. And he said, I think it's pretty straightforward. Snell had the lowest ERA in the National League by more than half a run. At the end of the day, a pitcher's job is to keep runs off the board. Everything else we measure, strikeouts, walks, hits, whip, all of it is for the purpose of keeping runs off the board. Snell was far and away the best pitcher in Major League Baseball in doing that this year. His ERA lowest in the majors. Only allowing 19 earned runs last 23 starts, how he was excellent from the end of May on. And it's not like he did it just averaging 5 innings per start through 180 innings, lasted 6 innings or more in 20 of his last 32 starts. And so clearly that's, a lot of what we've been saying. This seemed like a pretty clear case. Then there was another individual, and I'll keep his name, because
come on,
Padres Twitter, people get upset. I don't necessarily want their mentions to be blown up. They've been very, very generous with us in the past, and so I'll spare them the mean tweets. But he said, I'll probably be somewhat of a buzzkill on this one because I think his case is fine, not great. It comes down 100% to ERA because he doesn't stand out in innings or any of the other advanced underlying metrics. He has a very good strikeout rate, but not the best. That would be Spencer Strider. And obviously the walk rate is a huge negative, and he doesn't go deep into games. He's not pitching 7 or 8 regularly, but it's not like 4 or 5 all the time. None of which is to say that he's bad or undeserving or shouldn't win. If I had a vote, I'd probably choose him, though it would be close. But the reason he'll win is because he kept runs off the board, which is mostly a credit to him, and a little about the somewhat flukish and almost certainly not repeatable left on base percentage of 87%, which is one of the highest in many, many decades. So, interesting perspective there. And I think that last point is maybe why the Padres might not be willing to spend a whole bunch of money to keep Blake Snell around, because I think there is a belief out there that you could run this season back and you could have a completely different outcome for Blake Snell, because he had a whip of somewhere around 1.2. Guys were getting on base. He was just elite at getting them off base and getting out of jams. And I think there's this belief that sort of thing isn't necessarily sustainable. When 87% of the guys on board don't end up scoring, then maybe you wonder a little bit, if you run in that situation again, can you repeat that for 4, 5, 6 years, whatever a contract length would be? I've been a Blake Snell apologist. What was interesting is hearing him talk about the impact of Ruben Niebla, basically saying that Niebla told him, don't worry about walks. If you walk guys, it's fine because your stuff is nasty and you can get them out. And Snell said that actually kind of helped me out and helped me pitch at a Cy Young level, because I wasn't worried about things I didn't need to be worried about. I wasn't beating myself up about things that I didn't need to care about. I was just confident in my stuff, told myself I'm going to be great, and didn't sweat the small stuff. I would think Ruben Niebla wouldn't give that advice to just anybody. I don't think any pitcher that walks in the door is like, hey, why do you care if I'm walking people? You told Blake Snell it's okay to walk people. Well, because Blake Snell's stuff is nasty. So that seems like good coaching there, kind of catering to the players that you have. But it's interesting, kind of some of the underlying stuff with Blake Snell that make some people not crazy about him as a candidate. But on the flip side, he got to where he was because he had a pitching coach that played to his strengths and cleared out some of the clutter and helped him just kind of focus on doing the job. And once he did that and got confidence in himself, he pitched at an elite level.
He's a different dude with a different pitching style. And that pitching style worked for him. And a big reason why is what you talked about and what Niebla said. And Snell has talked about this. Somewhere after the start of the season, he got over stressing and worrying about the walks because he trusted his stuff. And he said, even if I walk these guys and they're on base, my stuff is good enough to not allow them to score, to get out of the inning. It's an unorthodox approach, but it worked awesome for Blake Snell this season. And sure, we can quibble with the stats, and he hasn't had as dominant of Cy Young seasons as previous Cy Young winners. But that's part of baseball awards. Sometimes there's just not a dominant guy out there with a hose of a season. But let me read you something about Blake Snell. We can quibble with some of his stats, but look at this. Hits per game. These are all in a row. Consecutive hits allowed in a game. 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 4, 2, 3, 6, 2, 3, 5, 1, 0, and 4. He's like unhittable. He could walk as many guys as he wants. If he's not giving up hits, he could walk 3 guys an inning and no one's scoring. I mean, he is hard to hit. And sure, he walks a lot of guys, but he doesn't allow a lot of guys to score, Darnay. And he keeps you in games, and he wins you a lot of games. Could he be better? Of course. Could he be Nolan Ryan? Could he throw 9 innings? God, everybody wants that, go the distance. But I'll take Blake Snell. And in a world where Major League Baseball pitching is hard to find, Blake Snell is going to help you win a lot of games, my friend.
Yeah, and 15 homers allowed in 32 starts. The last multi-homer game he had was May 19th, and his run started May 25th. And I want to say, I think I went back and looked, like none of those homers were like they're all solo homers or something like that. Obviously, because he wasn't, giving up many runs. So he was elite at limiting damage and not giving up big swings. And maybe he'd get dinged for a homer, but there basically was never runners on base when that happened. And so, credit to him for navigating some of that stuff and knowing who he is, like knowing what worked for Blake Snell might not work for Garrett Cole or Kevin Gausman or Justin Steele or Joe Musgrove, but he understood himself, and that seemed to be the key for him kind of taking off this year, even if it wasn't necessarily perfect.
Ruben Niebla would never give that advice to Ryan Weathers. Just walk a lot of guys. Don't worry about it. You're exactly right. The style worked for Snell, and it worked for his second Cy Young.
And, he said there was a stretch in August. I'm looking at it now, where he was only going, he wasn't getting to 6 and 7 innings. I think August 5th allowed 3 and 5. Start before that, allowed a run in 5. Certainly no disasters or no clunkers in there, but maybe not as. And so he said some doubt started to creep in, and he was just like, no, I'm great. I'm going to go out there and be great. And like, it's just such like a funny, simple answer, but hearing him talk about it, I thought was so interesting. Like we could all use that advice. Like we all have clutter, self-doubt that enters our mind, be like, nope, I'm great. And I'm going to go be great. And that's what he did. And he said that helped him click from August on. In his last 6 starts, he shut out 5 of his last 6 opponents, quality starts in his last 9, like 0.47 ERA from the end of August until the end of the season. I mean, he was ridiculous. So good on Blake Snell. He doesn't know what the future holds for him and the Padres, and said he didn't think about free agency before yesterday because he knew Cy Young Day was coming and he wanted to just kind of focus on that and enjoy it with family.
I don't believe that for a minute.
But well, he might not be thinking about it, but Scott Boras for sure is thinking
Yes,
about it. And so that's the
100%.
beauty of having an agent. He doesn't have
There
to
you
think
go.
about it until Scott Boras hits him up with an
Yeah.
offer or something like that. And so yeah, it's he said, taking aside the money piece, he didn't
Yeah.
talk about the money piece, but obviously that's a
Yeah.
factor. Wants to be at a place where he can, be the best version of himself that can help him get there, and a place that's positioned to win, for the foreseeable future. Padres seem to check both those boxes. But I think the contract could be cost prohibitive, especially being that he's pretty much at the top of the market of starting pitchers, and the price always seems to get driven up with those guys, and so it might be hard for the Padres now, unless if there's a Juan Soto trade and they free up money there and say, hey, there's 3 spots in the rotation is too many to fill. We want to bring Snell back. Who knows? That could be a possibility, but I think the expectation is that Snell will end up somewhere, maybe in his hometown of Seattle. I know there's been talk about Philly. I worry a little bit with Blake Snell if he gets off to a slow start, Cy Young winner, big contract, and the Philly media market is just killing him. But maybe they'll give him a standing ovation like they gave to Trey Turner, and he'll snap back into Cy Young form. But I think you and I both enjoyed being around and covering Blake Snell. Fun guy, different guy,
Yeah.
unique personality. Great interview, and so certainly wish him the best. Would love to see it here in San Diego, but cool covering a Cy Young season and seeing him do what he did, and we'll see if he's part of the Padres' future plans.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how free agency played out, because we know the Padres are going to do everything they can up to a certain fiscal limit to sign him. The Dodgers are going to come with some big, huge money at him. You mentioned the hometown Mariners. There are some other teams that have been mentioned. So it'll be very interesting. And the teams that are going after Blake Snell are all teams that are in the playoff mix or close to winning a World Series. So wherever he ends up could be one of those power shifts of the offseason that really shapes how the season will turn out. And so Blake Snell's left arm, where that geographically ends up, will definitely impact the standings next season, I would tend to think, especially if he makes a jump within the National League West from team to team, whether it's LA or the Giants, or maybe heard Arizona as an outside shot at him. So very dicey indeed, and very interesting for Padre fans and baseball fans.
Sounds like the Giants could be pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
Now with a new manager, that would be very, very interesting. So we'd see how that plays out, and I know folks around these parts would be watching that situation very closely just to see how things go. This is Blake Snell when asked about Peter Seidler after he won the Cy Young on Wednesday.
Owner that cared so much about winning, about the city of San Diego. He cared so much about the players that were on his team. He trusted his staff that was around him. But my relationship with Peter, it was the first time I ever talked to an owner on the field and face-to-face for an hour or 2 hours. And he was just the most genuine and pure soul. He was just such a great man. And I know today, if he was with us, I know he would have called me and he would have said, how proud he was and repping San Diego, and that means a lot. But everyone who knows Peter knows he's just the most gentle soul that is so loving nonstop. So it definitely hurts not to have him here, and he's one of the best. So it's definitely going to be tough for San Diego and what he's built, moving forward.
And some great visuals there provided by the Padres. Obviously, that shot of he and Manny Machado. But I think what struck me is Snell saying, you don't interact with owners the way that you interact with Peter Seidler. You don't have these long, in-depth, heartfelt conversations, and they feel the love, they feel the care, and as we spoke about Tuesday. Like when you have a lockout, it was just 2 years ago around this time that the lockout started. and you pit the players against the owners, you know. And I'm sure there are professional athletes for a number of organizations, but they see the owner, you know, come by the locker room or courtside or field, you know, in the stands off the field, what have you, maybe kind of give him a bit of a side eye. I don't think that's happening with Peter Seidler. There seems to be just so much love and care and respect and appreciation for the man he is and the way he looks after and cares for them, which is neat. It was neat to hear that from Blake.
Yeah, a lot of Major League Sports owners are leery to go into the clubhouse or don't want to get too close to their players, and vice versa. Players don't want to get too close to the owners. And then a lot of owners kind of look at their players as these are my guys, these are my buddies, and try to hang with them. And it's a fake relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Seidler's relationship with his players was very real, very comfortable. And it's not just Blake and Manny. He has many other players that have come through here over the years that he has real relationships with, and it's a comfortable give and take. It's not just I see you here or I see you at a charity benefit. As you said, it's a real thing, and that's special in sports for sure.
Yeah, it's a good note to end on. We will see what next week brings. I would think high potential of a new manager, and then what we hear from the front office and what things look like there going forward. So a lot to discuss next week, and we will be with you to do that. Todd, appreciate it as always. Enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend.
Thank you, my man. And wouldn't it be so Padres if they announced their manager on Thanksgiving? They called the press conference at 2:30. Come on, Padres.
Don't even joke. Don't even joke about that.
Don't do it. Don't do it.